Hello and welcome to the Mobalytics patch 11.9 tier list. I'm Danox Harrison, and we have quite a big spread of champion and item changes on the patch. As per usual, our team of experts have reviewed these changes and we'll be going over their initial thoughts and predictions for the patch. Let's get stuck right into it. Starting off with top lane. In the God tier we have Garen and Urgot, in the S tier we have Dr. Mundo, Wukong, Cho'Gath, Nasus, Malphite, Shen, Darius and Kled. Top lane has seen a range of changes with a decent spread of picks benefiting from it. The big point to talk about first is a nerf to Turbo Chem Tanks Active and the Dead Man's Plate. These items were utilised often by junglers, but there are a few tank tops and juggernauts who would benefit, so this will tone the power of those items down slightly. In terms of champion changes, it's mostly been tweaks here and there. Yorick was feeling the hurt from his nerfs last patch and dropped down, Pantheon has fallen off in relevance in general, and Set was given some solid buffs when he builds more AD. One pick that has emerged is Lee Sin in solo lanes. Since his buffs in last patch, he's been doing well at lower ranks, but has a pretty low play rate, whereas it's very popular at higher elos. I expect it to start to permeate down ranks over the patch, and although he's a very high skill cap champion, he is a pretty strong duelist and has good wave clear thanks to the Tempest CD reduction. Gwen isn't showing on our list due to the fact she's not really performing well, currently working with a 45% win rate, so isn't even justified to be B tier. She's in need of some buffs, although it does seem players are getting to grips with the kit, she's still performing as essentially a worse version of Aurelia. Moving on to our highlight picks, we have Mundo. He got some solid buffs to help his top lane laning on the last patch. His increased regen and full HP refund on cleaver hits on champions has allowed him to navigate the early game more successfully, and we've all seen how godly he can become in the later stages. The changes on paper don't look too substantial, but considering Mundo has no mana and is gated purely on HP costs, anything that mitigates that and allows him to handle trades better will make a big difference. In lower ranks, he's easily capable of running over teams, and when you're dealing with a Fed, Jinx, Tristana or Ashe, he's one of the champions that can run them down and withstand their damage, at least before they've got 4 or more items. Shen has been a solid pick in solo queue, being able to assist his team with his ultimate, allowing him to contest both sides of the map and contribute to getting his bot lane ahead, which gives him huge value. On top of that, his laning is solid, he can go toe to toe with most bruisers in the 1v1 thanks to his Q damage and his ability to block autos with his W. On this patch, he had his ultimate buffed, and now scales with his own bonus HP, so later in the game it's going to be crazy powerful. Considering it also shields for more when allies are lower HP, you can easily see a humongous shield which can save a critical carry's life in a team fight. This means Shen's going to remain relevant throughout the game as he can provide heavily for his hyper carries as the game goes later, and the scaling is pretty substantial, so even after 1 to 2 items you'll still be getting value. Kled's been performing really well recently. I think a big aspect is his laning phase. He can comfortably handle a range of trickier champions as his dueling potential is really solid. He's tricky to dive and slippery to gank, and as a result he's very consistent if you're confident with him. When it comes to skirmishes and teamfights, he's great at causing disruption and getting onto the enemy backline, while also allowing the rest of the team to route in. If your team is looking to dive, he's a solid pickup to facilitate that, and he thrives with getting stuck into fights as he's very bulky, and if he's able to remount he gets a huge amount of value. Moving on to the jungle. In the God tier we have Volibear, Diana and Morgana, and the S tier we have Nunu, Nocturne, Udyr, Shaco and Elise. Jungle meta has been shaken up massively, not only the effects from the changes of last patch, but a massive factor is the Hecarim nerfs. Hecarim not only had his core items targeted, but he received a ton of nerfs to his kit on top of that, and so has plummeted massively. This may create some power vacuums that other champions fill, but we'll have to see how things pan out. Other changes were a buff to Kindred's Q, which definitely will have benefits, but there wasn't too much Kindred success at lower ranks, and that's unlikely to change. Kayn had some buffs to his Ras form, but once again, he's been struggling ever since his Q's cooldown nerfs, and this is not going to be enough to shift that, at least we don't think. Diana flew up the tiers with the changes she got last patch. Although there's been a tiny nerf to tone that back, she's still firmly in God tier. Her clear is solid with a huge amount of early attack speed and strong AoE. Skirmishing is really where she excels, being able to dive priority targets and quickly executing them while having the base stats and a shield to withstand any response. Diana is particularly strong at playing around lanes with CC as it guarantees the Q will connect and allows her to land her full burst combo. Later in the game, her assassination potential is amplified, and you can see her diving backlines and executing carries with the Zhonya's to keep her safe and buy time for her cooldowns to come back up. Definitely a strong option if you want to carry through the jungle. Morgana is another pick who flew up drastically in popularity with the buffs she received. Once again they've been toned down, but her win rate is off the charts and with good reason. Her clear is really strong and she's able to bring powerful CC into her ganks. Her binding has such a long duration, and once you're 6 you can easily follow it up with your ultimate. In teamfights, AP Morg can function as peel for high priority AD carries, or you can look to go aggressive as a flash ult in tandem with a stopwatch, or Zhonya's can single-handedly carry a teamfight. Morgana's AP ratios are pretty solid, so as you pick up items in the later stages, you get to the point where a binding into pool on a squishy target will decimate their HP bar. With Hecarim being nerfed, one of the strong dive alternatives is Nocturne. Capable of easily getting backline access and dishing out a ton of damage and disruption, he's hard for a lot of teams to deal with. His ultimate offers so much threat even when not being used, as teams have to respect that you can fly in from a long range. Expect teams to play more defensive while you have it available, and if they do overstep, it's an easy window for you to fly in. I think a big factor as well with Nocturne is he shuts down global champions. The likes of Shen doesn't function well with him, as you can't ult until the paranoia has disappeared. TPs become irrelevant, and sometimes even in team fights, disruption is enough to find a key window to take out a high prio AD carry. For mid lane, in the God tier we have just Diana, and in the S tier we have Nico, Annie, Malzahar, Ahri, Fizz, Vladimir, Anivia, Echo, Zed, Yasuo and Katarina. Mid hasn't changed too much. Rumble, despite being nerfed to push him out of mid, actually has found more presence. He's getting a slight nerf on the patch, but his numbers are solid and this won't be enough to push him out. Corki is actually looking really good right now, which is a bit of a surprise considering he normally has a low win rate in solo queue and does better in competitive. I think it's worth picking him up if you're a proficient Corki player, as you're likely to find a lot of success based on his current win rate. Vladimir popped off last patch, and Riot was quick to offer partial reverts to the buff, but I think with how well he synergizes with the ability haste heavy items he's been building, and with his Q cooldown still lower compared to 2 patches ago, he'll still be a strong mid lane pick. His wave clear is his weak aspect and he can be shoved in and pressured early, but as long as he can sustain and survive, he'll scale into an absolute monster. The extra mobility provided by Protobelt and Cosmic Drive enable him to find easy backline access, and in the later stages often his ult EQ will 100 to 0 a squishy target. If you're playing Vlad, then expect to be a bit behind in pressure till you hit around level 9 or 10 and have your Q maxed and get the extra CDR from Transcendence. Things really pick up from there. Zed has risen in priority across Elos. His ability to execute targets, find AD pressure and most importantly deal with AD carries is really valuable in solo queue. Often in laning phase, your lack of mana and strong poke can find you outlasting opponents. You can fish for opportunities for all-ins on the back of your shadow, but things really take off when you hit level 6. Zed's ult allows not only huge outplay potential, but also gives you massive bursts that can decimate squishy targets. Particularly late game, you can ult E auto ignite, and that can be enough to kill a target without any armor, especially when you have a ton of lethality. Xerath got some solid buffs on the patch, a significant boost to his Q AP ratio as well as some solid damage buffs to his W. Xerath is niche in the sense that there are definitely some bad matchups for him he can struggle with, and he's also heavily gated by whether or not you can connect with his skill shots. However, with these buffs and the fact he is reliable and safe wave clear, he's a good pick in the right matchups, and if you find yourself getting later in the game, he can decimate. Hecarim being nerfed definitely helps, and you should be on the watch out for dive threats as they can make his life difficult, but with huge range, it's often impossible to position super far away from your opposition and provide artillery fire. Moving on to AD carries, in the God tier we have Justana, Jinx and Sivir, and the S tier we have Misfortune, Seraphine, Swain, Jhin, Vayne and Ashe. AD carry has gone kind of untouched this patch. The biggest nerf was a bug fix to Jinx where a rocket AoE was doing more crit damage than intended. It's definitely a hit, but currently she's still performing well, and with champions like Lulu being so strong, she's one of the best AD carries to pair with her. Cobmo got a minor buff to his Q shred and mana cost, which isn't going to change anything with regards to his strength. Currently his best lane is with Lulu, and more than anything that is what is pushing him up to A tier, as they're a very powerful duo, but alone he's not so amazing. Jaime got nerfed, but he was already represented very sparsely, so he has dropped down despite being a solid pick for players who are experienced on him. In the current meta of strong scaling AD carries, the likes of Lucian, Ezreal and Draven have all really struggled and as a result dropped down a B tier. At the moment they just can't do enough to shut down the meta AD carries. Ashe's lane control and ability to start fights are a big strengths. With the ult cooldown being reduced recently in the later stages, this allows her to fish more freely for picks at a point in the game where one kill can result in a big objective being secured. Her W in lane allows her to shove and harass in a range, means she can bully shorter range carries while also holding her own into the longer ranged opposition. Currently Ashe's build allows her to shred through even the tankiest targets, as her flurry in tandem with Kraken Slayer absolutely melts. Positioning can be a bit trickier with Ashe, but with the strong peel support you're in a prime position to carry. Misfortune has been making a bit of a resurgence, particularly in higher elos. She's a queen of lane bullies and can carry that strength into the mid game where her ult can absolutely shred. A big factor people often overlook is a passive allows her to move around the map really quickly, whether it's catching waves, returning to the lane or rotating to fights. Couple that with the slow on her E and the extra mobility of Gale Force, and she's capable of running down targets and popping them with a couple of autos. In teamfights, ult usage is key, and often it helps to have a strong engaged support like Leona to lock down your targets so you can get a strong channel in. It's key to be on the watch for abilities that can interrupt you or targets that can dive you. Often it works well as a cleanup ability, although with a big engage it delivers something that can instantly wombo to end a fight. Jhin is another champion who thrives on movement speed, and Shirelli syncs really well with him, allowing him to ice skate around fights. He's easily capable of sidestepping and outplaying, and with every crit giving him a burst of speed, it becomes hard for anyone without point and click CC to lock him down. Jhin scales well as it gets to the point where his crits just annihilate targets with him being able to reach huge amounts of AD. His W and execute damage on his 4th auto mean in the laner phase you can look to find aggressive 2v2s, and with paired with champs like Thresh you can layer CC and burst down a target. Finally, onto the supports. In the God tier we have Leona and Lulu, and in the S tier we have Soraka, Bran, Nami, Morgana, Leona, Blitzcrank, Zillion, Bard and Thresh. The big thing that emerged with the support is Shirelli has been a really strong item for enchanters. The movement speed buff has a ton of value, and champions like Karma and Lulu are thriving with the extra utility to help facilitate the AD carries. A big talking point was Thresh. We moved him down to 80 with the nerfs to his flare, and it feels like it was just a bit of an overreaction as he's still doing solidly. He's not as strong, but definitely still justified for S tier. Lulu is the premier enchanter support right now, and she got buffed on this patch as well. Her W now a 1 second shorter cooldown and grants more attack speed to allies. I said this before and I'll say it again, her W is one of the most powerful non-ultimate abilities in the game. The ability to not only buff your carries with speed and attack speed, but more importantly being able to silence and disarm and slow enemies for 2.25 seconds as a point and click ability. Fighters, bruisers and assassins all struggle so hard to deal with this, and the fact that the cooldown was reduced means with high amounts of ability haste you have very little downtime. Lulu syncs really well with most hyper carry AD carries. Jinx and Kog'Maw are two good examples, but honestly the raw peel she has means even with non-hyper carries, she's still a great option into slippery assassins like Zed. Leona has risen up as the god tier engaged support on lower elos. A big factor is with Thresh having his flame nerf, which was a great tool to shut it down, and with Morgana now being banned more and contested by the junglers, her counters have become less prevalent, allowing her to flourish. She's a really strong pick into enchanters as they thrive from surviving lane and scaling, and Leona doesn't allow them to do so. Her burst damage from passive and W pop means your AD carry just needs to throw a few auto attacks in to be able to 100-0 a target. When it comes to late game, your engage allows you to kick off a fight and hunt down vital targets, being able to ult from a distance or E-flash for a more consistent engage. Soraka got a minor indirect buff with Moonstone getting a bit more healing, but even prior to this patch she was looking really solid. Moonstone's changes hurt champions who don't have much healing in their kit and relied on Moonstone to provide that, whereas now that it grants a boost to all healing, Soraka is able to output even more and keep her team healthy. In terms of scaling, she excels over a ton of opponents, being able to reset fights and utilize their silence to frustrate ability-based champions. With how prevalent grievous wounds are, you'd think that would slow Soraka down, but I think that really shows how strong she is, because despite almost every game you play Soraka, you know the enemy team will grind grievous wounds, she still manages to perform well. That wraps things up for 11.9, I hope this has been helpful and you feel a bit more clued up on the coming patch. Be sure to subscribe if you want to keep updated with our tier list, and fly on over to Mobalytics.gg if you want to check out the full list in one place.